In this video, I'm going to go through a really tricky reading comprehension paper and answer every question exactly as I actually would. Me, a teacher with lots of experience over the years teaching this sort of thing. I'm just going to answer it how I would answer it if there was no one around watching me, if I just had time to just go through it myself. And I'm actually going to show you the processes that I go through as someone who's done this for years. And hopefully you can pick up some insights along the way and it can maybe help your strategy as well. So of course, in the previous videos, if you've checked out part 1 and 2, I've already shared lots of strategies and tips. I will be using lots of them and putting them together and doing it in my own way, and hopefully it'll be really useful for you. Now, in part 1 and part 2, we looked at text 1 and text 2 from the 2016 reading comprehension paper, which is notoriously known as the hardest ever reading SATs. And if you watch part 2, you might be hopefully agreeing with that already, because the text 2 in this paper is just really hard. Text 3, I think, is a little bit nicer because I personally really like non-fiction. I think it's easier to navigate the facts and find the information because it's kind of, normally, if you're lucky, you get subheadings, and that makes it really easy to find information because you can just look at the subheading that's most likely to have the information you need. But if you get something like this, which is a non-chronological report about, it's just a fact file about the dodo, the bird. I'm sure you've heard of the dodo bird. Then yeah, you're going to have to read through it, but it's still much easier to find information. So a bit shorter than the last one, 635 words. It's going to take you about 4 to 5 minutes to read this, but what are you going to do? Because in the first part, my first video, I said, no, don't read the text for the first text. You can just get straight to the questions. It's normally such an easy text, the first one. You can just read the questions and go back and forth easily. In the second one, I was like, do you know what? If you're unlucky enough to get a story in the second text, I'd probably read it first because actually there's so many questions that rely on a kind of understanding of various parts of the story that you might as well just read it. But in this one, I'm going to show you how I do it. I'm going to use my summarizing and visualizing skills, but I'm going to read it at my own pace, and it might be completely randomly different to how we've done it before. So watch what I do. Hopefully you learn some things along the way. Let's do this. So here's the first question in this section. Now, I know it doesn't say number 1. That's because it's the third text in the paper. So it's number 23. And it says, look at the paragraph beginning for thousands of years. Love this when it signposts you where to go. What does the word spat suggest about how the island of Mauritius was formed? So some really interesting language here. I'm thinking about spat and how that tells us how the island was formed. Those 3 words are the only words that really matter in that sentence, in that question. So do you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to the text. This is what I'd do in the real thing. If I was sat there doing the test for the first time, I'd have a look at the text now. And I'd probably just read everything up to the paragraph that it tells me to start reading. Because actually there's no point skipping the introduction, is there? And saving 20 seconds, but maybe missing some really important kind of introductory information. So this is what I'm going to do. This is an article about the dodo, a bird that is now extinct. An artist's impression of the dodo from 300 years ago. Interesting picture. And it's called The Way of the Dodo. I'm going to read the first paragraph. And I'm going to summarize at the end of it what I think it's about so that if I ever have to come back and I need that information about this paragraph, I've already processed it in my head. I've summarized it. The dodo was first sighted around 1600 on an island in the Indian Ocean. It was extinct by 1680. Very short span of time is what I'm thinking. Since then, the phrase dead as a dodo has been used to describe something which is lifeless or has disappeared from the world completely. Because of its rapid disappearance, a number of myths developed about the dodo. For example, that it was a fat, silly creature that brought its fate upon itself. And if you've heard of the dodo, you probably thought that yourself. We kind of laugh at the dodo, and the idea is that it didn't seem to be around for very long, so it must have been really silly. And we often take the mick out of it in cartoons and things. And then it goes on to say, but what is the truth about the dodo? So very quickly, I would, in my head, I wouldn't sit there talking to myself in the test. I would, in my head, think to myself, oh, okay, the introduction just introduces the stereotype, the stigma around the dodo, what people think about the dodo and why they think that. Cool. And it looks like from the rest of this, based on this question here, but what is the truth about the dodo? It seems like maybe there's more than we know, more behind the curtains about the dodo that perhaps we've not considered before. And it looks like we're going to find out that in this text. So actually reading that first bit was really useful for me. I've got a good understanding of what I think this text is going to be about now. Let's actually read the paragraph where we need the information to answer the question. And we're going to read the whole paragraph because there's no point chopping up paragraphs, just read them all at once. For thousands of years, the island of Mauritius was a paradise. That means really lovely. it was spat out of the ocean floor by an underwater volcano 8 million years ago. With warm sun, plentiful food, and no predators to speak of, the isolated island became a haven for a variety of unusual species, including reptiles and flightless birds. Okay, cool. That paragraph there was just simply introducing the island in which dodos live on. It's an island of Mauritius, and it's been around for about 8 million years. And going back to the question, it asks us, what does the word spat suggest about how the island was formed? So what we're really doing there is thinking, okay, what can we link between the word spat and how an island is formed? Well, think about the verb to spit, the action of spitting. It's quite a quick process, isn't it? It happens very suddenly. So if you were just to put, it happened suddenly, you would get yourself your mark and you could move on. 3 words and you're done. But as always, there's normally 1 or 2 ways you can get the mark. So, don't think that's the only answer. What else about spitting is there? Well, spitting is like you generally spit something out when you don't want it, right? So if the ocean floor spat out the island, then it suggests that it was unwanted or unneeded. Oh, excuse my spelling, guys. Unwanted by the ocean floor. Or just by the ocean, whatever. Okay, so both of those things, they'd get you a mark. You don't need to have. There's not only one way. You can get it in a variety of different ways. First question done, nice and easy. That's how I'm. Hopefully, you're finding this beneficial. I'm thinking out loud for you guys, so you can see exactly how I answer the questions. Now, what I'm going to do as I go is I'm going to tick off the paragraphs that I've read. Okay, I'm going to tick everything off as I read it, and I'm going to show you that by the end of the video, by the end of answering these questions, that I've read the whole text as I've gone. I've just read it as I needed it, rather than reading it all first and forgetting what happened. But I am summarizing as I go to help me remember the order of events here. So just to recap, what have we got so far? We've got an introduction that tells us about the dodo and why it's kind of mocked and laughed at and its extinction. And then we've gone into the truth about the dodo, and we've now learnt that about the island of Mauritius and the fact that it's been around for 8 million years and it was a really, really nice place. It was a paradise. It had no predators, loads of food. Sounds like a great place. Now let's go to the next question, and we'll read more if we need to. Curious and unafraid, the animals of Mauritius offered themselves up for slaughter. Page 10. Why were the dodos curious and unafraid? Why is a really important word there. I'm gonna write because right now. That's how you answer a why question, right? Because. The dodos were curious and unafraid because, well, let's find out. Let's keep reading. So I can see curious and unafraid right here. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to tick through what I've got, and I've got to this paragraph. Then in 1598, humans descended on this paradise, accompanied by their own animals, dogs, goats, cats, and a fair number of rats. Curious and unafraid, the animals of Mauritius offered themselves up for slaughter, and within just a few decades, much of the island's unique wildlife had been wiped out forever. So this paragraph doesn't tell us why they're curious and unafraid, but the paragraph before gives us all of that confidence, right? All of that information that we need. So just by the way, at the top right, every single question, I'm telling you what kind of question it is. This is an inference question, so we have to read between the lines, use evidence to back us up. Now, what's the obvious answer here? Why were they not really afraid of anything? Why were they just kind of, looking around, curious, unafraid? Well, I think it's quite obvious. Surely it's because, we learned in the last paragraph, they lived in a paradise. There were no predators. If you've never seen a predator before, what reason would you have to be afraid of another animal? Which is what humans are, right? And the dogs and the cats and the goats. So I think that's the best answer, because they'd never experienced a predator before, or predators. Okay, that's it. That would get you the mark. Done. They'd never experienced predators. That makes sense. It explains why they were curious and not afraid, instead of terrified and running away. Okay, hope that makes sense. Next question. Find and copy one word from page 10 that tells you that some of the animals on Mauritius were only found there. So we've got another word meaning question here. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of word meaning questions in the third text that's quite common, because they're really just seeing who reads loads, who reads enough books so they know what these words mean. That's kind of how they're testing your ability here. So let's go back to me. This is how I'd answer it. Find and copy one word. First of all, notice that it's one word from page 10 that tells you how they were only found there. Well, if we look at the text, so we've read all of this. At the end of this paragraph, it says this word right here. It says, Much of the island's unique wildlife had been wiped out forever, and unique tells me that it's one of a kind. You won't find it anywhere else. So unique is the word that we need. Simple as that. Okay, moving on. Let's go to number 26. Now, split into two parts. So sometimes I like to read both parts because it might help. Sometimes part B kind of clarifies part A a little bit. So let's do that. First of all, we're going to give 2 reasons why Mauritius was a paradise for animals before humans arrived. And then it says, look at the paragraph beginning one of the victims to the bottom of page 10. Give 2 reasons why the dodo became extinct after humans arrived. So it's kind of like a before humans and after humans question. I get it. It makes sense. Tough though. Look, you get 1 mark for each one, but you have to mention 2 things. Right. So let's have a look then. Let's start with this one. 2 reasons why it was a paradise. Okay, why was it a paradise for animals before humans arrived? Well, nice and easy. Let's just go back to the paragraph that we've read. Because we've summarized, I know that this paragraph, not that one, these 2 paragraphs were all about the before and after of humans, right? When it was a paradise and when it wasn't. So that's what I'm going to need to answer both parts of this question. So let's read the first one. It says, for thousands of years, it was a paradise. Okay, why was it a paradise? Not answered yet. It was spat out of the ocean floor by an underwater volcano. Is that why it's a paradise? I don't think so. I think you need to understand that the next bit of information might not necessarily be the reason. Then it says, with warm sun, plentiful food, and no predators to speak of. I mean, that's what makes it a paradise, right? That's what makes it such a great place to live. So let's just pick 2 of them. I'm going to put plentiful food. So plentiful food. Oh, let's go back to the right place, guys. Plentiful food, and don't be afraid to just copy the words it uses. Why risk changing it? And also, what was the other reason? No predators. There you go. We've got ourselves our 1 mark for this one. We've mentioned 2 reasons why it was a paradise. As an adult, by the way, I quite often flick my eyes back to the question just before I move on and just double check that I definitely answered the question and I didn't slightly change it in my head and therefore, answering a question that doesn't exist. Next bit. Look at paragraph, blah, 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 blah. Give 2 reasons why the dodo became extinct after humans arrived. Okay, let's go back to the text. Why did it become... So it says start from here, one of the victims. And it says to the bottom of page 10. So do you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to read to the bottom of page 10 now because it's telling me to. One of the victims was a large flightless relative of the pigeon. The island invaders started to call the bird a dodo, which meant silly bird. Although the dodo was hunted for food... Well, look, straight away, guys, do you know what I'm doing? I'm thinking about what that question said. I've just found my first reason. I'm going to bank it by underlining it, and then I'm just going to keep reading. So the first reason they went extinct was they got hunted. So I'm holding it in my head. This was not the main reason it died out. It was more likely that having never faced predators before and unable to fly away, the adult birds fell prey to dogs and cats. Okay, so they were eaten by the dogs and cats because they couldn't fly. So there's another reason there. I've already got my 2 reasons, but I'm going to read the paragraph anyway. Meanwhile, their eggs and chicks, defenseless in their nests in the ground, were easy pickings for rats. So actually, guys, there's a 3rd reason there. I'm spoiled for choice now. The eggs and chicks were defenseless. And then the last bit, because it tells me to read to the bottom, less than 100 years after man's arrival, the dodo, which had once numbered in the hundreds of thousands, slipped into the pages of folklore. In other words, they were no longer around, they were just part of the storybooks. Right, going back to the question, because I read the question first and I was looking for the answer as I read it, I sped myself up massively. Give 2 reasons why the dodo became extinct after humans arrived. Okay, hunted by humans, and eggs were defenseless. Defenseless is an E there. Eaten by rats. Done. I've clearly shown I understand why they became extinct and I've solved the question. Moving on. We've got to get through this. Because realistically, guys, you have like 20 minutes to solve this. About 20, 25 minutes if you've been pacing yourself right. It's going to take me longer than 25 minutes because I'm explaining to you every single thought I have as I go. But hopefully you guys in the test will feel like you've got enough time. Next question. Look at the paragraph beginning one of the victims. What does the word invaders suggest about the humans arriving on Mauritius? Okay. Do I really need to look at the paragraph to talk about what the word invaders means? Not really. I could do if I wanted to. We've got the paragraph there, but as an adult, I'm not going to do that because I know that it's not going to help me. I already know that invaders means unwelcome, doesn't it? If you're invading somewhere, that's because you're not supposed to be there. So what does the word invaders suggest about the humans arriving on Mauritius? Humans were unwelcome and unwanted. Okay, I'm going to make it really, really clear by using 2 words to back up my point about what invaders means. That's it. All right, so I've sped myself up there. I got my 1 mark. I don't need to go back and read that paragraph because I know what invaders means. It was just another word meaning question, wasn't it? Okay, moving on. So we've now read the first page. This is the second page here in the test booklet. We've got a good bit of information. Can we summarize it though? I'm going to let you pause the video actually now. I want you to, without rereading the whole thing, can you summarize what has happened so far from the start up to the little bit we read about after 100 years of man's arrival? Have a go. I think it's fairly easy because we've read it so clearly and I've thought out loud. I think it's quite obvious. It introduces the dodo and why they are mocked and the fact that they went extinct. Then it introduces the island they live on. It tells us how the island was a paradise, but then humans came and it was no longer a paradise, and humans, amongst other reasons, hunted them to extinction. And after 100 years of humans being there, they were no longer there. Done. Cool. If you can keep that in your head, you're going to find this test easy. I promise you. We've got some more to read. Let's find out the question first. Number 28. Why were artists' drawings from the time of the dodo not always accurate? So this is really important, that from the time of the dodo, sometimes people miss out information like that. They might just reword it in their head of why were artists' drawings not accurate? Not all artists, not artists now. It's saying artists from the time. Let's find some information in the text then. And by reading the next paragraph, because we've not had anything about artists yet, have we? So obviously I've got to read some more to find out. Until a few years ago, all knowledge of the dodo came from secondary reports from the time that were not always reliable. So that's kind of backing up the question to saying that people from the time didn't do very reliable drawings. A handful of remains and just 1 complete skeleton. Nobody knew what the dodo really looked like. Okay, doesn't that answer the question? I'm going to keep reading though. I banked it in my head, I'll keep reading. And in fact, I might even just underline it so I don't forget it where it is. Before cameras, newly discovered animals could only be drawn or painted. However, many of the artists had no knowledge of natural history and were more interested in producing colourful paintings of animals than recording their true likeness. So that to me there is kind of another reason really, isn't it? So I go back to the question, remind myself of what it was saying. It says, why were artists' drawings of from the time of the dodo not always accurate? Well, there's 2 reasons I can pick from there, isn't there? Because I could say because they didn't know what the dodo looked like, or I could say because remind myself, because the second bit there, because they were more interested in making them look good than actually being accurate. Okay, so either of those answers would be completely fine. I'm not going to write it down because I'll pick either of those, and either of them would get you 1 mark. But I really want to show you something with this question, guys. I want to show you the mark scheme and just how precise you have to be with your language. And you're going to think this is mad. Okay, this is the mark scheme. It says award 1 mark for they didn't know what it looked like. Fair enough. Or they wanted to make the pictures colourful. That was the second point we were talking about. Or the fact that they weren't scientists. They didn't know about natural history. That was another good point. And then at the bottom, just look at the bits I've highlighted in yellow and just think that's how picky they are. They wouldn't accept no one knows what they look like, but they would accept they didn't actually know what it looked like. Very subtle difference, right? And they're kind of saying that, well, don't accept an answer that suggests that no one still knows what they look like, which is kind of what that does, right? It's in present tense. If you change that to no one knew what they looked like, you might get an answer, but really we've got to be referring the artists, they, because the question says artists, they is referring the artists. By saying no one, you're kind of opening it up to everybody, right? So be really, 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 really please careful with your wording in your answers. To be honest with you, when I mark these papers, because I do this all the time at school, that's one of the most common ways kids miss out on marks. Is I can tell they know what they mean. They just don't write it. They don't clarify what they mean, and then they lose marks because of stuff like that. Because the mark scheme is horrible. Okay, moving on to number 29. Another word meaning question. So many word meaning questions, guys. The mudflats would have formed a freshwater oasis in an otherwise parched environment. Give the meaning of the word parched in this sentence. Guys, there's no trick around this, really. You just kind of need to know what parched means. Anyway, if you've ever someone's described themselves as parched, it means they're really thirsty. So if an environment is parched, how can I, what does that tell us about the environment? It's very dry. It's very dry, or I could say, it's very dry, or I could say barren. That means it's not there, barren of water. Okay, any way to say basically there's no water there, it's really dry is good. Now, trick answer to this one, where you wouldn't get the mark, is to say it's really hot. You got to be careful because it is really hot. That's probably why it's parched. But the question doesn't say explain why it's parched, does it? It says what does parched mean, and parched doesn't mean hot. Parched just means thirsty, lacking of water. So be super careful by always going back and reading this. That's what I do as an adult, because I know the tricks are there. So I read the question again and just double check. Is it a how or a why or a what question? That makes a big difference. I'm going to go straight to number 30 then. Now, I'm going to read some more. Look at the paragraph beginning then in 2005. Okay. Find and copy one word or group of words that shows that scientists were not sure what happened. That's really important. Not sure what happened to most of the animals during the drought of Mauritius. So we're going to try and find, as we read it, we're going to try and find something that shows that scientists weren't sure. That means they were not 100%. That's what not sure means, okay? Let's look at it. So we're going to go to that next paragraph, which is right here. So we've just learned that artists didn't really know what they looked like, okay? Then, in 2005, a team of scientists unearthed thousands of dodo bones in some mudflats in Mauritius. The remains date back to over 4,000 years ago when the island was suffering from a lengthy drought. Now, if you don't know what a drought is when there's not any water, so it gets really dry, hence the parched term. The mudflats would have formed a freshwater oasis in an otherwise parched environment. There's that phrase from before. It is thought that most of the animals, while trying to reach the slowly receding waters of the lake, became stuck and died of thirst or suffocation. However, clearly some dodos survived, as they did not become extinct until much later. Guys, there's one word, or I guess a group of words with one keyword in here, that tells me that the scientists weren't 100% of what happened, that they're just, maybe 80% or whatever, but they're not entirely sure. Which word or group of words is it? Pause the video and find it. So it's funny, isn't it? Because it doesn't actually mention scientists in this. So we can assume it's kind of from the perspective of scientists discovering these things. And the phrase we're looking for is right here. It is thought that. That to me says it's our best guess. We think, we don't know for sure. So going back to that question, find and copy one group of words that shows the scientists were not sure. So the one word would be thought. That's how you'd get the mark, but you're allowed to do a group of words because it says. So you could have put it was thought that, and you would get the mark for that as well because it's the same phrase. It's just, it's emphasizing this word right here. Now, if it did just say find and copy one word and it didn't say this, would you get the mark now? No, honestly, because it says one word. If you can't read the instruction that says one word, they're not going to give you a mark in a reading paper. That's the way to think about it. Harsh, I know, but true. Okay. We're nearly through this whole text, aren't we, guys? We've learned a lot. Could we summarize it? I bet you could. I reckon if you've been following this journey with me for 20 minutes or so, you could probably summarize that whole paper without looking now because of the way we've thoughtfully read it as we've gone and summarized it as we've gone. So we had all that stuff at the start that we summarized. Now we've got two more paragraphs. We've had why artists' drawings weren't very good. And then we've learned that in 2005, actually, we found loads of evidence now, I guess, as to what the dodo might have looked like. We found loads of bones and remains. So the next paragraph is hopefully going to tell us what we did with that. But let's find the question first. It says, what does rehabilitate the image of the dodo mean? Rehabilitate the image of the dodo. Well, let's find that in the text and read the paragraph. Let's read the next paragraph now. In fact, we're going to go this way. This discovery is helping to rehabilitate the image of this much ridiculed bird. That's interesting. I think that sentence is enough. It's saying the discovery that we just learned about, as in the bones that they found, is helping to rehabilitate, let's assume we don't know what it means, the image of this much ridiculed bird. So it's kind of emphasizing the fact that this bird has always been ridiculed and that this discovery, showing what it really looks like, not based on these artists' silly drawings, is hopefully helping to rehabilitate it. To me, I think that screams that it's helping to kind of repair the image, like restore its reputation almost as not being this fat, silly creature that it's quoted at the start. So let's look for an answer that kind of talks about that. Is it helping us restore, I like that word, a painting of the dodo? No, I think the idea of talking about a painting just doesn't quite sit right. In the same way of this one, repair a model of the dodo. Those ones just don't really work as phrases, do they? I think it's one of these two. Rebuild the reputation of the dodo. That sounds good. Or review accounts of the dodo. Review kind of means to just sort of look over it. Doesn't really make sense. It's more about like a healing process, right? A rebuilding, a rehabilitate. When someone's rehabilitated, they're kind of rebuilt as a person. You know, they've built themselves back up from the ground up. Rebuild the reputation of the dodo is definitely the answer. Awesome. Now, we didn't read the whole paragraph, so do you know what I'd do as an adult? I'd go back and read it. I'd just read that paragraph now because I was in it. The very fact that the dodo was still alive and well on Mauritius 4,000 years after a drought that claimed the lives of thousands of animals is an indication of the bird's ability to survive. That's quite a nice sentence, isn't it? It's kind of bigging up the dodo now. Maybe it wasn't as silly as we thought. The remains are also helping scientists to find out more about the anatomy of the dodo. That kind of means like how its bone structure worked. What it looked like, maybe. For example, that it was a much slimmer bird than any picture suggests. So again, really going against that idea that it's a fat, silly creature. Interesting. Right, let's go look at the next question. According to the text, how did the discovery of the dodo's bones help to change the image of the dodo? Okay, I think we've kind of explored this idea, haven't we? According to the text, how did the discovery of the dodo's bones help to change the image of the dodo? You might have noticed so far in this video, guys, I read most questions twice. And I'm not doing that for you on the video. I'm actually doing it for me. And I do it in real life as well. Because do you know what? I've just got one of those brains where I get halfway through the question. I'm already starting to think about what the answer might be. And I don't really pay attention to it properly. So I quite often just read it twice to make sure I'm on the right lines. So how did the discovery of the dodo's bones help to change the image of the dodo? So basically, what was the consequence of this? The consequence of this was kind of explored in this paragraph, right? Okay, so what did it do? The bones helped scientists realize that it was not a fat, silly bird as first depicted. Wouldn't you agree? That's what the dodo's bones did. They helped because it allowed scientists to represent, I guess we could say, represent the dodo more accurately. The dodo more accurately. And I'm not going to get the mark unless that's too vague right now. I need to say what I'm talking about. More accurately. It wasn't fat and it wasn't silly. Because, I'm going a bit over the top here, but I want to make sure I get the mark. Because it survived the drought. That's what the text actually told us. Well, not the drought, the drought. Okay, bit over the top there. I wrote a bit too much. I probably could have slimlined that, put that down a bit further. But that's kind of what I'd write as an adult there that's struggling to make sure. I don't know how much evidence they want. I've not seen the mark scheme for this question. I don't know. So I think it's better to be safe than sorry. So I'm going to write that. I don't think any of that goes against the answer, my answer, or changes it. I think it's just a really, really clear, succinct answer now. That's it. There you go. Maybe you can think of a better way to write it. Okay, so that's what we've read now. We've read almost everything apart from this last paragraph, okay? So let's have a look then. Number 33. Below are some summaries of different paragraphs from the text. This is the last question, by the way, probably the hardest one. It says number them 1 to 6 to show the order in which they appear in the text. The first one has been done for you. Right, guys, because we're at this last question where we need to have an understanding of the entire text, I think it's worth now reading that last paragraph so we can tick it off. As scientists learn more about the dodo and begin to see the bird in a new light, we are reminded that the dodo was badly misjudged. Maybe it is humans who should be judged, as we can have a devastating impact on the natural world. No other creature should be allowed to go the way of the dodo. I feel like I've been told off, don't you? Like, that's a bit of that's like your teacher being like, well, there's a lesson to be learned there, kids, and this is the lesson. Maybe next time you won't do that mistake. That's kind of what that last paragraph feels like to me. Now, because we have been summarizing each paragraph as we go, I'm hoping this question is not going to be as hard as we think it is. Let's have a look. We've got 6 things. We're going to try and put them in order. So the first thing was a summary of the plight of the dodos. That means the downfall of the dodos. And that is what that first paragraph did, wasn't it? It summarized the extinction of them, basically. Cool. What happened next? Well, I don't need to look at the text because I remember it because I summarized. Next, it introduced the island and then it introduced humans coming along. So let's see what happens. Do we have anything about the island? No. So we can assume it's the next thing then. We've got humans arrived on Mauritius. Okay, so humans arriving is the next thing that happened. Amazing. And what do we learn about humans? Well, we learn that the humans are the reason that they go extinct. So actually, there's my next one. We learn that the humans come along, and then we learn the reasons that they went extinct, mostly including the humans. And that's kind of where we got to when we was talking about the first page, wasn't it? That was pretty much all of that. So everything else now is going to be on this second page. Can we remember what happened? Well, I do. I remember that this paragraph was all about artists, misrepresenting them. I remember this one was all about a big discovery. And then this one was all about how the discovery helped to change and update the image of the reputation of the dodo. And this one was kind of a lesson being learned at the end, the moral of the story. I think that's enough to answer this. We've got 3 left. We've got an important lesson is learnt. Guys, clearly the last one, isn't it? Come on, it's not going to be anything else. Now I just need 4 and 5 in here. Which way around does it go? We've got new information is discovered about the dodo and an explanation for the unreliable evidence. Oh, so that's talking about the artists, which comes first. And then we have the new discovery of all those bones, which helps us learn a bit more about the dodo. I'm hoping that you are looking at that thinking, actually, I did find that question not so hard because we explored each paragraph so well. Now, guys, look, this video is 30 minutes long so far, or just over 30 minutes. And I have been going at a much slower pace than what you'd be doing in the test. I've been talking about loads of things. I've been exploring the answers. But even still, in 30 minutes, which is probably about 10 minutes over what you'd want to spend, we've done every single question. We've got full marks, by the way. We've got every single question right as we've been going. And we've read the entire text. So we've kind of done all of it, right? Anyway, I don't know. It is up to you now to decide across the 3 videos what strategies you found most useful. I really hope that by splitting the 3 texts into different videos, you can see from a teacher's perspective how there are kind of different strategies for each one. Also, depending on whether it's fiction or non-fiction, might break up my strategies. But you need to have those strategies in your belt in order to use as you wish and solve these questions accurately. Guys, I'm going to leave you with this in the comments because I need some interaction, guys. I want to see you commenting down below. I want to know if you enjoyed this video mostly. But I also want to know your thoughts on your preference about reading the whole text. Would you have still preferred to have read the whole text and maybe done those little summaries as we've gone? By the way, I've said here writing summaries. If I was in the actual test and the paper was in front of me, I probably would have jotted little words next to each paragraph to basically my summaries. So the first one I would have put the downfall of dodos. On the humans one I would have put humans arrived. And the one below it I would have put why they went extinct. And I actually would have written those summaries down. So would you prefer to read the whole text and kind of do those summaries as you go and have the whole text done? Or do you prefer to do what I just did on that one, where you sort of read the text slowly as you need to, as you answer the questions? Let me know in the comments down below. I would love to know your thoughts. I'd also love to know what you think about these videos and what you want to see more of in future. We've got the SATs coming up at the time of recording this. Maybe you're watching this in the future and you've got your SATs coming up. Maybe it's 2052 and you've got your SATs coming up. I doubt I'd still be around on YouTube doing. I don't know. Maybe it is. Who knows? Hopefully have we got 1 million views? Have we got 10 million subscribers by then? I don't know. I'm losing the will to live. Guys, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.